Are your people working hard but not reaching their full potential? The problem is not effort, it is development. At the Modern Observer Group, we transform workforce development into real performance. Our human-centered achievement programs help your team think better, communicate stronger, and execute at a higher level. That means higher employee engagement, stronger leadership, and measurable results across your organization. If you want a workforce that performs, leads, and delivers, it is time to invest in your people. Visit modernobserver.com and discover how the Modern Observer Group helps you build a workforce that wins.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Correll, and I'm here with my partner and my buddy in empowerment, and we're Jan Jeremias, and we're just sitting here getting started with our weekly conversation, and not quite sure where we're going to go with this one today, Jan. But I'm kind of in between two places right at the moment. My heart and my head, it wants to enjoy this weather and get outside and do things, but my body is telling me that I'm really, not thinking with a clear head. So I do what I can do, but in the meantime, I get very excited about our time together, because I really, my experience is that I always learn something new, and I always leave with some kind of a perspective that I didn't have before we had our chat.
Yeah, I first of all, I love what you're sharing, Bill, because I think that a good conversation is like that.
Yeah.
You don't know exactly where it's going to lead, and through the conversation, either whatever the exchange triggers something within you that makes you think or just look at something maybe, or maybe get curious about the way you've always looked at a situation and say, oh, maybe I could look at it this way, or maybe I never thought about it like that. And then all of a sudden you're like, it causes you to look back on something maybe that you've gone through or that you're thinking about, and you think to yourself, oh, like, what if I add this in? It's like different spice in it or something. Like, maybe if I add in this, well, what would that be like for this situation? Or how would I feel about what's happening?
Yeah. And while you're speaking, my mind is kind of traversing many different subjects, including the fact that yesterday was Mother's Day,
Mm-hmm.
and things that have been happening. I think that's an area where I probably could have done a better job of reaching out to people than I actually did. Just to kind of like tell it like it is. My day yesterday was a lot about sitting and recovering and going through a period of time of just remembering all of the mothers that aren't here anymore. Why I started thinking in terms of that. Not really sure, but what I'm left with is that I could have done, and I will do a lot better job today of acknowledging the women that I think in my life that are powerful mothers and moms. Both my daughters, one has kids, the other one doesn't, but they are both phenomenal in terms of caring, and having a motherly instinct in them that they got from their mother, who's my best friend in life, and her mom was something that was really special as well. And we did spend a little bit of time yesterday talking about how much her mother did for her. And I can say this about that: I didn't have a lot of specific responses to the fact that it was Mother's Day, but I just had a kind of like a general um, unease, if you will, unease. And it might be because there was so little opportunity for me to actually speak with anybody and wish them a happy Mother's Day, which normally I do that, I get energy out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm noticing that now.
Mm. Yeah, I texted around and I can share what I wrote. Well, basically, I wrote Mother's Day can hold many feelings at once: warmth, appreciation, tenderness, and sometimes a quiet ache. And so today I acknowledge all expressions of mothering, the love given, the care offered, the memories carried, and the strength it takes to nurture in any form.
Right.
And I think that I always acknowledge that in everybody. You know, I mean, definitely kind of sort of, I want to say directed more toward the feminine energy, but and then Father's Day, I'll do the same for the guys, but definitely feeling that, whether you're like, I mean, I've always considered myself a mother to four-legged creatures, but I'm still a mother. And I'm a mother to my students and to my friends, not in the same way your mother would be, but that same sort of nurturing and caring quality, which I kind of feel like is who I am. And so I've always thought about it. And I've always thought of my friends. Like I have a friend who I know has always been a mother to her nephews. Like this is just, and I always wish her happy Mother's Day because I know that she was a huge and still continues to be a huge influence in their life. And so I just feel like it's that acknowledgement to me of, and then I saw a lot of some posts where people were actually acknowledging Mother Earth. So, I mean, same thing of like nurturing the planet. So I feel like that kind of caring energy.
Yeah, it's kind of typical to ascribe certain values and direction and energies that would be identified as being matronly or motherly or something or nurturing, that sort of thing. And at the same time, nothing could be further from the truth for some mothers, that's just not who they are.
Hmm.
I mean, there are some. I mean, some of the neat things that I saw, we're talking about, cocky ass bitches that never give a quarter, and until the day they die, they're going to be fighters and blah, 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 blah. And that's another type of mothering. But if you think about it in terms of being the one who cares for young people who are not yet capable of caring for themselves holistically, the responsibility that goes along with that, and the fact that for some women it just becomes routine, that bring whatever it is, we've got this, first when the first one's born, they bubble wrap and do all these sort of things and rush them to the emergency room. When the second one comes, break your leg, and your mom says, get up, walk it off.
It brings to mind that, well, and I don't know necessarily, like, again, whether I look at it as being, that kind of mothering. Cause I look at like, my relationships and like my relationship to my mother now, and which I find in some ways is reversed in a lot of ways. Like I'm doing the mothering,
Yeah.
But I do think it's like, as you were talking, it reminded me of I worked with a woman I remember, and she had three boys, and I was there for all three pregnancies and all three. So I remember going when she had her first, and was time to nurse, and she just like the room had to be quiet and everything or whatever. By the second one came, she's nursing the second one. The other one's like a year and a half and holding on to her shoulders and whatever. And there's mass mayhem happening around her or whatever. And she just turned to me and said, the second child, kind of thing. And then the third was totally different because it was just like all of a sudden, it was like that whole idea that you had to have a particular atmosphere and it had to be quiet. Like, basically, the baby was hungry, you were going to feed it. And if it was chaotic, it was chaotic. And if it was quiet, it was quiet, So,
And if it was hungry enough, it'll consume, no doubt about it.
and without, that's right. If it's hungry enough, it's going to eat no matter whether the room is quiet or noisy.
I don't know. We've lived enough time that we've gotten to see so many different manifestations of mothering. And to me, I find it fascinating how the natural world and animals behave so differently in terms of how long they'll be with their young before they boot them, and they're expected to survive on their own. But it seems to work, for the most part. And the other ones where, I don't know, an animal, a baby winds up being, with their parents for 5 to 10 years, and in some cases live in their parents' basement until they're in their 50s, So we have all sorts of different possibilities these days. But I think at the essence of all of it, um, I think I'm kind of left with, I don't believe I could acknowledge or say thank you quite enough.
Hmm.
I don't think I could settle that score. You know what I mean? Like balance that account. There's just been so much more that I have received in my lifetime, and not just from my maternal mother, from all of the great women that have been around me and provided, uh, you know, what I would call iconic ideals that not by what they said, but what they did and how they conducted themselves.
Hmm. Well, I love what you said because it becomes much more, you said not by what they did, and it becomes much more action oriented of like, versus just, I don't know, not, maybe just, words can be action oriented, but just different. Like they demonstrated and they personified what it meant, what that care was.
Yes.
It was like they embodied it.
Yeah. Thinking about all of the, well, a lot of the pressure that's been on women, period, politically in the last 40 to 50 years to be something that's not natural, that's not naturally modeled, in the wild. It's not naturally modeled in life at all. And at the end of all of it, how people determine what works for them and how they choose to live their life, the actions, I think, are a demonstration of what they finally figured out works for them. And I think the neat part of that is that there isn't just one way to be a woman. There's not just one way to be a mother. And I think where it shows up, at least I would say where I've seen the greatest evidence of women being really great mothers, and then some guys being great mothers too, when there weren't women to do it,
Hmm.
is stepping into a situation with no idea what to do and handling it with grace and handling it with balance. And I think that's an important part of our lives. I think you can't wish that away. You can't wish for that part of the family to be handled in a different way. I think it produces a different result in terms of the kids, no matter how old they may be.
Mm.
So yeah, I've been waxing a little bit, and
I know,
quite
I'm just reflecting on that. I do think that it became almost very taboo to be what might have been considered what was more traditional to be like a mother and a woman. Through the years, being exposed to that myself, the whole idea of like the last thing you wanted. I remember thinking to myself, the last thing I want to be is a stay at home like mother or wife. That
right.
was so like how limiting and how, w- you know, just how limiting and how old fashioned that was. And realizing, with everything, not saying that, it was nice because people got to kind of choose their path in a lot of ways, if, eventually. But because I do not think it's the path for everybody, like every path, I think you have to find your own way.
Right.
But I do think that, what people learned was that, even though it was preached that you could have it all, you can't have it all. I'm sorry. Something has to, in my opinion, something has to give, and I'm not saying it bad, but you have to come to a place in yourself where you kind of understand that and you recognize that something is not going to, like, you can't give everything your full attention, and that there's going to be times when, you step into one role or another, or one aspect or whatever. But that whole idea of, like, to me, having it all was just like, all of a sudden it was like, not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I said it's been tough for 40 to 50 years. I mean, prior to that, I'm sure it was tough in different ways, but
And that's right. Exactly.
we've gone through with affluence comes the ability to rebel, and to um, indemnify, or to um, vilify, if you will, something that you don't understand. And I think that the original ideas, as I understand it, like for instance, the '60s giving rise to the '70s and feminism and all of that sort of thing. The pendulum always swings too far. What happens is when you've got women who or groups of people, period. I mean, like right now, what we're going through with people vilifying wealthy individuals because they have more money than they should. Well, that's an interesting concept. It happens to be something that's not generally true, and that's really what the overreactions typically bring is a response to a boogeyman that's not really out there. So you can create through verbal, what I like to call, painting a picture of the worst case of how women have been downtrodden. Well, the answer to the question is there's always some of that there. There's a lot of that there for some people, and there's none of that there for others. But again, one size doesn't fit all. But with with movements where people are looking to belong, or they're looking for an answer, and they haven't quite decided what their issue is, they hear something that sounds like it might be, and they get into it and they inspect it for a while, or they might even be the ones that are professing it at the top of their lungs. And then later on, they sort of, well, I guess we didn't have it right, that there might be a role for men to play in women's lives. And the neat part of it is that I think where people are successful in developing their own way of being and their own way of working out what they need to have for a partnership in the world is less about what people have told them that their role should be, and more of what they have worked out in their daily successes and failures of what actually produces the results they're looking for as a couple, as somebody going through life, trying to build a family, trying to build, some family wealth, trying to be a good person in the community, trying to raise their children, not so that they can, just get along, but so that they can be good listeners and go actually hear what's missing in the community to bring energy to solve that, as opposed to picking a topic and, yelling fire when there is none, and getting, things at an outrageous level. So I can tell you personally, I'm sitting here thinking about a meeting that I went to Actually, it was while we were writing the book on death, and one of the gals that was there, probably, I mean, I'd buy her lunch. I'd be very interested to hear what she has to say about it. But like, so she kind of announced to the whole group of women, if you remember, there were probably me and three or four other guys, and everybody else that was writing chapters. They were all women. But she announced that she was going out to do battle with the patriarchy. And I thought to myself, what the hell is she talking about? What does that mean? So I went and watched YouTube videos for about an hour afterwards, and I said, this isn't true. And it's not true. Somebody had an experience in their life where they thought that something was caused in a particular way, and that shaped the whole rest of their being.
Well,
As
that's the way all experiences are, you know
exactly.
you know, and I think that one of the things that you were just saying with, as a couple or whatever, whether things are whatever, and that requires something that I don't know that, I mean, I look at my, you know, let's say my marriage, which that requires something called communication. And
Absolutely.
and I don't know that people go into a relationship kind of understanding, or they change and they both aren't able to communicate those changes, or they both don't change to the same extent. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, well, and I think it requires something like, okay, well, communication. I mean, and I think about, what I did, and I was having a conversation with two other women a few weeks ago that are in a group I'm in. There's only six of us, so two other from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and we were all talking. One is older, was a real, I want to say was a real, probably for her country is definitely progressive. The other one's younger. We were talking about being women and everything, and I think that my deal was I was gonna yes, I worked full time. I was not cooking during the week. I just wasn't. I was exhausted. Like, I commuted 3 hours a day, maybe four, in addition to working a full-time job. And my attitude was I cooked on the weekend and we had leftovers for whatever days we could have leftovers. And if he wasn't gonna cook, then we went out because I didn't have enough hours in my day
Right.
to be able to do that. And I'm not saying it was bad nor good, but it wasn't something that happened like the day we got married. It wasn't like that. But that was like because he met me and I was already working. But I was just like, I can't. I mean, yes, I can stay home and then maybe I can have dinner on the table every day at 5, but or whatever, or 6. But when I walk in the door at 7:30 or whatever, after leaving at 5 or something, I'm sorry, like, it just wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. I wasn't like, it was not gonna happen,
Exactly.
and I think that it's all about communication, and that people sort of realize that before they're going in.
Right.
And and then, like I said, you can't count for life changes and, like you said, experiences that happen, and then all of a sudden, things change and you shift.
Well, it's all about on the job training.
Right,
And
exactly.
some people are up for it and other people are not all that much. And it doesn't really say anything about them as people, but if you're not communicating and you're not describing the future that you both are working on, or sharing the priorities that are important back and forth, you get into these roles, which are not thinking roles, but they become a habit. That if you do have one partner that stays home, and we've actually seen that shift, that in a lot of cases women go out and they're a much better earner than the man is. So he takes the domestic side of the deal, and she goes out and makes a lot of money. So I think for the people that it has worked out for, they haven't resisted, they haven't given it a bad name that they were doing what they were doing. If that makes any sense. Instead of like they're bucking the system and they're trying to prove it wrong or what all. No, they're just living their damn lives. you know who wants to get up and fight every day? I mean, you want to get up and you want to have a reason that's greater than you are, and that when two people or a family altogether can determine what out there is worth dedicating your life to. Some people do it through religion. That's gone through all sorts of trouble in the last 30 to 40. Actually, every institution has been degraded. And I think that in some cases, without getting too deep into the weeds, I think that it has actually been a priority that those institutions be removed as the backbone to our particular culture and civilization. It has to, in order for something else to take over, because it was just way too strong that people would come to this country and they would bring with them, usually coming from Europe, they brought a Judeo Christian ethic. We didn't have to train them on that part of it. We had to train them the language, and we had to train them on how to make money and how to, how to thrive. But now anymore, we're not, we're not bringing people in to assimilate them any longer into this country and culture. And that also is something I think that's being taught to our children, that we really were never, we weren't taught to go against stuff, until the 60s anyway. The 60s was, in my point, it was a breakwater, because essentially it's when people decided that whatever, the big government or the establishment wanted to produce, it had to come from evil. That's when I kind of remember it really, being languaged like that. But funny enough, it's the same thing that got languaged in Europe and Russia and China and Cuba. And, it was not a set of conversations that was unique to the United States. And most of it came in all of those countries from academia first. And then, as people came out and went into their roles in society, it's something that stuck, to some of the people. Along the way, when you're making religion bad and wrong, you're making the family unit bad and wrong, we're making all these things bad and wrong, what are we replacing it with?
Well, I think I think what you're speaking to is that what religion gave people were a certain set of values, that, which no matter what your faith is, kind of like are at the backbone to every faith, um, respect and honor and, you know, and certain things that are just like, care of other, thinking of other people, care for yourself, like all those things which are values. And I think that when that left without the breakdown of the familial unit as the substitute for teaching values, where it was the other place you got it was at home.
Right.
Yeah. So if that's not there, then where do you find it? You found it outside. And, what's that nowadays? That's, movies, television, social media. I mean, that's where, or other people that are outside of your familial unit, school, whatever, but you're not getting it at home like you did at one point or another.
Agreed. The training program that worked, I think, for the most part, for 100 or 150 years in the United States, it had two things going for it. First of all, it had a population that was more sparsely distributed across the United States and not so many people crammed into large cities. And we also had kind of a metered acceptance of folks coming to the United States. Once we had a gold rush and we had this and we had that, and we started to realize that too many people that were coming to the United States were going to put a drain on the rest of the population, that they started implementing, laws and quotas on an annual basis of what they thought would be a reasonable number of people to bring to the United States that could actually, most of them end up doing really great things for the country and for themselves. And I think that when I think about how popular it is today for people to espouse some of the things that they do, it's because their training didn't come necessarily from, it wasn't informed by how we grew this country and how we made it great, if you will, for the people who thought it was great. I think people didn't really care how it was if they could live their lives in peace and be safe, earn a good living, and maybe have enough that they could save a little bit and maybe go on a nice vacation every once in a while until they figured out, how to make the most out of their lives. And then some people went on to start businesses or to become leaders in volunteer programs, or whatever it was. As time went on and they had enough and their foundation nut was covered, they could go out and they could give back. And now I'm just very kind of wondering what percentage of people not saying the same thing can we absorb and continue with the predominance of what has worked.
And I'm thinking to myself, the other thing that it became a very big substitute was materialism as a substitute for values. And we just got off of a conversation, and a question that we opened up with is, when is enough enough? And I think what you started out saying, where like you came and I think about when I grew up. I mean, we didn't lack for anything, but we didn't have anything in excess.
Right.
It wasn't like we also knew the value. We also knew what no meant. The fact that, there were certain things that, for whatever reason, used maybe too expensive, that we weren't going to get. We learned no, and the fact that we could not have everything. And but we never felt like we didn't have, like, we always had definitely the basics, kind of thing. And yes, we did. We went on, some sort of vacation every year. It was usually camping or something that was low cost, but we went away,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But it wasn't extravagant, and it wasn't whatever to all over. It might have been in different parts of the US, but it wasn't all over the world. And how, we're fine. And I think what's happened is that there's that's become a value, is materialism.
Well, you'll get no argument from me. We our culture, it has been randomly affected by Madison Avenue and by all of the drive to be consumers, until that had to be made bad and wrong, and it was wrong to consume. But nobody ever sat down and said, "Hey, look, there's nothing wrong with you going and getting what you can in your lifetime. But by the way, make sure you're working on what's important first."
And in our conversation, we were like, and what's the why behind why you want it? And that, I think, that causes a much deeper reflection. It's
Yeah.
like, what's the drive for me to want this? Is it because I want to fit in and I want to belong? Is it because I have a true appreciation for it? Is it because I'm trying to numb myself from feeling lonely or inadequate or whatever feelings that I don't really want to feel? And so what's the why behind wanting something? And that materialism,
Yeah.
I think, is, the other thing to me is you have to start to ask yourself, is like, when is enough enough?
So the answer to that question is, I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's different for everybody.
And it's even different from us, depending on what time of life we're in and
That's
what's
right.
going on, how our health is.
Exactly.
I mean,
But
I
I
can
think
tell you
But I
My
think it's a
own personal experience, enough was enough for me 25 years ago. I should have just pulled off and and just took everything that I had and converted it into CDs and let it grow on its own for the rest of my life. That would have been the best business plan, as opposed to taking the risks that I did.
right. And but I think that like when we say, and I think you're right, because I think that's a question that you constantly ask yourself of like, depending on where you are in life,
Right.
you know, as I sit there and I'll like look at something and I'll say, I'll like it. And then I'll say, do I really need that? Like, do I really need it? Is it going to like, besides for, oh, it's pretty and yeah, it would be nice or whatever. Is there really this greater reason why, I need this? And then most of the time it's no, because you realize that what you have is enough.
That's kind of the answer I hope everyone has every day. And where it's not enough, you're going to get enough. And where it is enough, you're not spending your time there anymore because it's not returning you any, enjoyment on the marginal effort that you're putting into it. But my best friend Bob, who's no longer with us, God bless him, he went through about a year and a half of this being like the first thing that he asked me every time we got in the car to go drive around on Sunday for 8 or 9 hours. He'd say, Bill, because he was talking to me. I still had a thriving business. I was still making good money, meeting with people all the time. He looks at me and he says, Bill, when is enough enough? And I said, well, Bob, what's enough for you? And he didn't have an answer, but he loved asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a question that a lot of retirees ask when they hear about somebody who kept working into their 70s and past while they were still earning. Okay. It's like, if you can transition into a life where the energy that you've saved up, your retirement programs are all kicked in, Social Security, all that kind of stuff, and it meets your monthly nut plus a little, is that so bad? I think the risk that you and I have these days, though, is there's too many costs associated with living that we have no way of predicting how much they're going to be.
Right. But I think the other thing is that I wanted to just mention about that. I think it's why you continue and why you work. And we had this conversation in a group on Saturday. We had this wonderful, I guess he's the chair of the German Association of Longevity or something like that. So we were talking about longevity and, lifespan versus health span and, things like that. But one of the things that was brought up is that part of the reason that it pays so much to work is if it's really if it fulfills some purpose for you, like some purpose in your life, then yes, then I think work till you work whenever you want to work to. If
Yeah.
that feeds your soul in some way, if that gives you a reason to get up in the morning and to, or whatever. If it's just, that's different to me than either working because you feel obligated to work or working because, I don't know, some other reason that you keep on working and working and working. Like, that's different to me.
Yeah, the fundamental words that I keep coming back to are curiosity, as opposed to just doing things by rote, by habit, day in and day out, is to sit down every once in a while and take stock.
Mhm.
Say, what about my life is serving me? What's the main thing that I get pleasure out of these days? And the interactions from networking with people and not so much doing transactions that had big dollar numbers associated with it, but just the the fellowship of working on helping people solve their problems. At one point was probably why I got out of bed and went to as many different places a week as I did. Just because I enjoyed being known as somebody who could help. Somebody who can help point you to who can really solve your problem or who can really um, add some more knowledge to your decision making. And I think from that standpoint, it's like I look at my beautiful wife, and she gets up at dark 30 every morning. I mean, literally 4:30, quarter to 5, and gets herself through her morning routine and then off to go deliver the mail. And even after she's done complaining about something that didn't go so well or some strife with one of the fellow workers or something like that, I always ask her the same question. You want to keep doing this? And you know what she says?
Yes.
For now.
For now.
She's good at what she does. She has autonomy. She makes a huge difference, for a lot of people, including me. And this is one of those things that I think really helps her focus her maternal instincts to help be a provider and to help make things better. And so we have this partnership. And it's not one, that I would have ever believed that we could be at this place, but at least not 20 years ago, I would never have believed it. But
Mhm.
but where we are right now is based on the last 4 or 5 conversations that I've had with her. We can talk about anything. And we both have a lot of room to just plain listen to the other person. And I think that works. When I think about who she's always been as a mother for our children, all of our kids' friends, our nieces, nephews, you name it, it was a natural for her in our early years for me to go to a job, a 9 to 5 every day, and for her to stay here and have a daycare operation with maybe 8 or 9 kids under the age of 5, all running around and, causing chaos. She loved it.
Mm-hmm. But I think you speak to something that is kind of knowing who you are and knowing, like you said, and and that was like I look at myself and that was not something I wanted.
Right.
That just wasn't. Um, and so I think that you have to realize that about yourself. And then now you know, as I kind of evolve into like I think of everything as an evolution, like because life is change and um I'm not into we don't stand still.
Right.
Yeah, you have to keep moving. And I look at what is being kind of like, the opportunities that are being sent to me now. And I think to myself, I mean, I truly love, I'm getting more yoga classes. I love teaching. And I have loved teaching since I started teaching, not planned, but do.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm being, you know, opportunities are coming in or I'm hearing about stuff and I'm then responding. And that's been, yeah. So it's amazing to me how, for your wife and you do change. I mean, this isn't what I thought I'd be doing and, or where I'd be, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
No. How did you think about retirement back in those days?
Oh, I thought that I was gonna be able to retire at like, in my early 60s, 65,
Yep.
that I was yeah, I didn't envision myself being single, so it wasn't something I thought about, that was gonna be there.
Exactly.
So, I was gonna be single. It was gonna be an opportunity to travel, and go places that I'd always wanted to go. Um, I think I looked at it as much more of what I thought maybe many people did, like the more traditional, maybe because I was used to seeing my father, kind of thing. You worked for a certain amount of time and then you collected a pension and Social Security, and then you didn't have to work anymore. Not to say that was good or bad, but I think that that's how I saw it. I think what I said about purpose and working, I think one of my father's biggest challenges in life once he did retire is not having something productive to do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When
Now, on the other hand, my mother was a kindergarten teacher and she was very ready to retire. And she was never, I used to say to her, she used to say to me, I know I'm supposed to like feel like she's like, I know, I don't know. She had this weird kind of thing. She's like, I know part of me is not supposed to like, she loved every second of it.
oh
She
sure,
loved it. She was a kindergarten teacher for like 30 plus years. And she was like, I'm ready.
yeah,
I'm ready.
completely understandable. And here, I guess we're coming full circle again about the whole notion of being a mom. I think if you're going to be good at being anything, you've got to decide that's what you want to do. And I
Mhm.
think that there are women that are ill suited to being mothers. They're ill suited, to being a lot of things. But um, I just hope if there are times in life when we can just have enough headspace and know yourself as well as you're saying, and be in a you can let the noise go on out there, all the naysayers and the whatever, all that stuff kind of comes and goes. Have you ever noticed, there's these fads about how what a family should look like, and uh, when it comes right down to it, having the intestinal fortitude to say, I'm choosing to do this because it's the most important thing I can do with my life right now. I think that's a good thing. I don't think there's anything to be in it. Like I said, whatever it is that you choose to do, if you're happy with that thing that gratifies you the most in life, and it doesn't hurt or take away from other people, I think it gives you a lot more room to be everything you need to be in those other areas.
Mhm. But one thing, first of all, I have to say that I don't like the phrase ill suited. I think to me, like, find what makes you happy. Like, find, that place where, like you said, you loved and you could hear it in your voice. You loved when you went out to clients and you got to help them solve problems. So, yeah, like, and you could hear your love and your feeling in that. For me, when I talk and I think about teaching, it's like there's just this like warm kind of like really just overall, like it's an embodied, like it's a sensation that comes over my body of just like even when I think about that.
Yes.
Like find that for yourself, no matter what it is. I mean, it could be like, could be being a mother, more traditional type mother, and it might mean being something else.
It
And
also might mean inventing what it is for you, but expressing
absolutely.
yourself in it. Because there are professional women who take time off from work and they do a fantastic job at juggling everything until it gets bigger than themselves, and then they start falling apart. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because I think that, like I said, I think sometimes it's a balance and it's
Yes.
finding what's going to work for you. Like you said, the more non-traditional where women go out and work, and then, maybe the partners, the stay-at-home parent, mother, father figure or whatever, or mother figure. Um, but I think it's finding what is going to work for you. I mean, and then seeing if you can create that situation. I mean, I look at people I know who, let's say, right now are working and had a baby don't really want to work, you know,
Yes.
because they'd rather be home. But sometimes that choice isn't there either, depending on, finances and, but then there's all the other things that come in, like cost of daycare or cost of childcare and all that kind of stuff, which has to play a role too. And you just have to figure, somehow you have to work through it, or find people that can help you sort of navigate that to figure out what's going to be the best. Um, if you don't have like, let's say a partner or somebody to work it out with.
Yes. But I kind of find myself struggling to put a sentence together. But what I'm really kind of coming up with here is, if in life there are things that you really feel you ought to do, and you're either doing it because somebody told you you had to, or because somebody told you you couldn't, you need to stop listening to those people. You need to follow your heart. Yeah.
I think we all grow up with people like that. Or if they haven't said something, we have an idea of what they want for us.
Yeah.
I think we all, I think very few, I don't know. I mean, in my experience, somehow I think there's an idea in our head, or whether it be a societal expectation, and that's the word expectation. There's a societal expectation or a familial expectation or something that kind of creates this internal pressure of, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go to college. I'm supposed to graduate. I'm supposed to get a job. Yada, yada, yada. And to sit back and realize that maybe college isn't for you. Or maybe, pursuing something else is really what it's about for you.
Yeah.
But it is those questions of, like, I think that, I think there are those expectations, and we all have them from the time we're exposed to other kids and other human beings.
Exactly. Well, thank you for indulging me on the mother conversation. It's not something that we've talked about an awful lot over the years, but quite frankly, it's something that's really close to my heart right at the moment. And I just want to say thank you to all the mothers out there, and Jan, to all of the humans that consider you a mother figure. I want to thank you for that, because I do know that that's who you are for so many people.
And I mean, I love my mom, and I just have to say that, like every relationship, I mean, it's every relationship through every age, it takes work. I mean, I look at my relationship with my mother, and it was not always easeful by any means. And it's changed and evolved through the years
Yeah.
tremendously. It's like everything, it's like, as we change, the people we're around, how we relate to them changes. And
Absolutely.
how we think about them. So, but my mom's
Any nugget for our listeners this week?
well, just because Mother's Day is over doesn't mean you can't acknowledge your mother if you would like. So I don't think that's a bad thing to do. And maybe it isn't, a traditional biological mother or whatever, but maybe it's a mother in some other form, some other aspect of your life. But maybe just take a moment to either send them a message, and maybe that's just an energetic thought, but a form of acknowledgement. I'll say that.
Beautiful.
Okay.
So there we did it again.
Yes, we did.
And ladies and gentlemen, I oftentimes defer to Jan for this part, but this week I'm going to ask you. There are people in your life right now that your life works really well because they're in it. So would you reach out to them and just let them know how special they are and how important it is to you to know if they ever need you, if they ever really need you for anything at any time, they need to reach out to you and let you know. So thank you again, Miss Jan. It's been a marvelous hour again.
Mm-hmm.
Helping to create the lit candle in the world that works.
And the lit candle. Like that. Well, thank you, Bill.
God bless all of you. You have a really, really great week, and we'll speak again real soon. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.